either one of adding those would make us, would qualify us. Except if we did the R3, we'd have to make some changes in regards to zoning. We'd have to increase the building height from 2.5 stories to 6 stories. We'd have to change the lot coverage from 20% to 40% and open space down from 80% to 60. And then we'd have to increase the floor area ratio from 0.6 to 1. So there are some changes if we decided to make that, pick one of those areas to include as part of our multifamily zoning. And then the other one we looked at was R5. So R5 is the Arboretum, it's Huntington Woods, Cedar Pond, again, existing multifamily housing. There were a lot more changes that we'd have to do for zoning for that to comply. So those were the 3 options that we had our consultant look at. And that was what we were going to come back to the city council with a little bit more detail, make sure you had all that information prior to the meeting. Then that way we'd take that up and basically look for the city council's thoughts and opinions in regards to, if that's the right way to approach that. But I'm happy to answer questions in regards to that.
Thank you, Mr. Bellavance. Councilor Rossignol, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, but more of a statement. When this first came before us, I thought then, and I think now, that this is just a drastic overreach by the state. I think they already have mandates put upon cities and towns, being a 40B, that we have to comply with. I don't agree with those as well. This, to me, is just a blatant disregard for cities and towns and their right to have zoning. You're talking about changing. I think we've done a very good job, us as a council and us as a city, trying to get affordable housing in the city of Peabody without changing the landscape of our city. This mandate, and you use the word mandate, you use the word comply. The fact that we have to bow down to the state when they don't understand the zoning and the amount of time that this council put into zoning is an abomination. And I don't mean to go off, but I'm going to. And Mr. Bellavance, like you said, there are other cities and towns, Topsfield, Boxford, Rowley, Westfield, that have done nothing to add affordable housing. And we've added a residential overlay. We've added compliance to 40B. We've done everything in our power to adapt and add adequate housing, and we're still being asked to do more. At what point do we as a city lose our identity because now we're basically just bowing down to the state's need or want or desire for housing everywhere? To me, I asked the council last time this was before us to write a letter in opposition, and I still want to write a letter in opposition to the state because I think that this is a blatant disregard for cities and towns' purpose, which is zoning, and it's a blatant overreach by the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Rossignol. Anybody else? Councilor McGinn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bellavance, Mr. Chairman, through you to Ms. Bellavance. So did I understand correctly that the consultant came back and said that the 36.5 acres in the DDD complies as is? Is that?
Yes. I believe we would, instead of leaving it as an overlay, we would identify it as a district. That was really the only difference.
So I'm sorry, so it would have to become part of the underlying zoning. So there would be a change required, but not a change in any of the dimensional requirements.
Correct.
And so you're saying that you've found some adjacent area that gets us up to the 50 acres if we take that route?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's That's what I was hoping for. I mean, I certainly share a lot of Councilor Rosignol's concerns about this, but I was also hoping, you know, they did make some changes to this. We were originally a bus community, and they got rid of that whole category, right, because there was such an outcry from many communities like Peabody that, and so I guess now we're technically an adjacent community. Is that the correct?
Yes, yep.
Yeah. So, again, that was kind of what I was hoping the outcome would be, because I kind of agree with how you frame this, that we've done a lot over the years. I think that's kind of the root of Councilor Rosignol's frustration. I certainly don't want to speak for him, but you know, if we've found something that satisfies it, and you know, we could be done with this relatively painlessly and easily. Would you agree with that categorization?
I would, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. Just as a note, until we work out all the kinks on these microphones, if we could speak into the mic, get it as close as you can, it would be very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions, councilors? Councilor Melville, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Bellavance, when you talk about it, we can expand the districts. That means that we would keep the underlying zoning requirements would stay the same. We would just expand them into the other, because you had mentioned on some of these other locations, there were some height restrictions we would change. So when you're talking about expanding, it wouldn't include those particular items. That would occur if we went to these other locations that you had mentioned?
Correct. We wanted the consultant to look at a few different districts and see what we would have to do in regards to allow us to comply. And so we asked them to look at R3 and R5, which had multifamily housing already, and what we would have to do. So there were additional obstacles, I guess, to overcome, or other changes that we'd have to make if we were going to add one of those rather than the DDD.
Thank you. I think that'd be helpful if those do come forth. I really do think part of it should be like an impact analysis of what if we, you know, what is the potential that could occur if we do expand into those areas that are not currently covered. I think that would help the council make better decisions on the areas that we go through. I mean, unfortunately, it seems like this is going to be mostly a bureaucratic exercise in redoing our zoning to avoid some of the negative impact of this particular statute. And I do know it's an issue throughout the rest of the state, and communities that haven't done nearly as much as Peabody are suddenly finding where we were maybe like 5 or 6 years ago with 40B issues. So I really appreciate your work on this, and I think we're further along than other communities, but we still got some work to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Melville. Councilor Daigle, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Mr. Bellavance, and I'm sorry if I missed it, is there a time frame for compliance on this?
Yeah, the compliance for us would be December 31st of 2024. So we have about 15 months to comply.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Daigle. Councilor Manning Martin, this is a hot button for you. You okay? Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Bellavance, thank you.
I'll be back again, and we'll have some more information for you, and we'll look to go forward then.
We'll see you after the first of the year. Thank you. Next on the agenda was a motion by Councilor Manning Martin to get an update regarding 40B subsidized housing inventory, and we have His Honor the Mayor. Mr. Mayor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening to you. Good evening, councilors. Hope everybody's doing well. Mayor Ted Betancourt, and I do have a lot of information to provide today on our 40B subsidized housing inventory. The most recent update that we have is June 29th of 2023, this past summer, and our numbers changed because they have added now or changed from the 2010 census to the 2020 census, which as expected had an impact on our percentages and on our numbers. We went from 22,135 units that was under our 2010 census, and now we're at 23,185 121. So nearly 1,000 unit increase in that 10-year period. Certainly was what we were kind of expecting along those lines. The good news is that currently we are at 11.18%. Our units, our total is 2,595. So we are well over 200, coming up on 300 over the required 10%, which is good news. Now, some information to that's very important is there are a number of projects that are included in that number that are, I suspect, maybe some won't take place and eventually will come off, I would think. We have the Farm Ave, 116 units. We have the King Street, 133 units. Endicott Street, 64 units. The Mills, about 40 units. Oak Street, 54 units. And Newberry Street, actually, let me hold that one. Newberry, 180 units. That was the one on Route 1 up behind the Ultimate. So those count towards that 2,595 number. So I expect a number of those projects will go forward. I expect that some will not. So that could affect our number going forward. The other important news, though, to provide is that there are some development and housing that is not included at that number. The Walnut Street project, which I believe, Council Peach, is a 120...
It's 132 units.
132 units. That has not been counted yet. As well as a project on Newberry Street that's going to be 60 units right near the Sonic, which is similar to the Monastero project that we did in the back there. That's been approved, and those 60 units have not counted. And also Dearborn Road, and there's a couple of other smaller projects that have not been counted as well. So I expect, and the hope was that some of those numbers would come off, and then we would supplement now moving forward. So I truthfully feel very comfortable knowing that we are well above our 10%. I think now that has allowed us to have more bargaining power in projects that are brought to us. Certainly for a while there, we had little, if any, leverage. And it certainly was very frustrating when a development would come forward. We would meet with them, and we would express our concerns about size, and they would just say, well, we're just going to go to the state and get the approval there, and that would put us in a real difficult position. I think those days are behind us. I think there's been a lot of good work. Some projects I really appreciate, others not so much, but I feel like we were put in a very difficult position. I don't think you want to hear the history of why we're in that position, but I think we're in a much better position now and expect that to continue for some time. I was a little worried about where we were going to stand after 2020 census numbers came out, but it was as we expected, and it didn't affect us very little. And I think we have some good coverage now. So happy to answer any questions. Kurt certainly has information on some of the other projects that you can mention as well, but happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Manning Martin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mayor, for joining us this evening and giving a presentation and an update on our affordable housing numbers. I have a question for you on these comprehensive permits that were issued, and we're counting those numbers. When do those become null and void if they don't break ground? I know there's a time limit. Do you know how long that is?
3 years, and there's some that we are right up against now, quite frankly, that could be off any day now. So it's 3 years from the time of approval.
Okay, so what that means, if I understand it correctly, if they don't break ground in the 3 years period, then they'll fall off our affordable count, and then our affordable units will, the number will be less, and then we'll be heading away from the 11.18% and back down towards 10%. Do I have that correct?
Yes, absolutely correct. We would, those numbers would be reduced and reduced from our total SHI number, and that's something that I do expect with a couple of the projects. So it's 3 years, unless they came back and got the approval again before the 3-year expiration, then those would continue to count for us. But any of those that fall off, that would have an effect on our number.
And would you know offhand, I don't remember the order that they came in. Was the first one King Street?
I would think King Street and Farm Ave would be the longer ones that have been
So, and
pending.
those are big numbers. That's 116 and 132.
Yes.
So those are big numbers. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So with the economy and the cost of building, I would expect that the chances are increasing that many of these are not going to break ground within the 3 years. So along those lines, Mayor, what I wanted to kind of go over and have the city take a look at, because of the things that we've just mentioned, to keep kind of our inventory as high as possible so that we can protect against what the city's gone through, as you've recapped, with large development being rammed down our throat through the 40B process. And I've heard it at some ZBA meetings. I just want to be clear, and whether Kurt Bellavance wants to address this or not, that's up to you, Mayor, that I've heard it said at the ZBA meetings, and it's not quite accurate, that the state does not tell us what our numbers are. We submit our affordable housing numbers to the state, and they record it. So the state doesn't tell us. We tell the state, and we keep our numbers on file. So I just want to make sure that we're reporting everything that we can. And I know that, and I know I've talked to Kurt about this in the past, recovery homes and houses, DMH housing, the house doesn't count as one affordable unit. It's the beds within the house. So if you have a recovery home that has 8 to 10 beds in it, that's 8 to 10 units that can be applied to your subsidized housing inventory or go towards our 10%. The same is with DMH housing. It's the number of beds counts as a unit and not the residence. And I know that Kurt in the past, and I know that this is true and accurate, and the state says this, because they've said it to him, and he's reported it out, that they don't disclose. They find it, they claim it's confidential information to disclose the residents. So if we don't know where the resident is, the address is, we can't count the number of beds. We can't match the number that they have on their record, because they say it's confidential. It's not confidential. It's not HIPAA. They're not violating HIPAA. But the state is quick to say, we're not telling you it's confidential. And if you look in your packet, you can see some units that were provided to us by the mayor that it says confidential. I think on page 2 of 7 of that, you can see confidential 4415. It's DDS, and that'll be Department of Developmental Service Homes, confidential, and they have us down for 164 units. We can't cross-reference that to make sure that that's accurate because they won't tell us what address they have, what address says they have. Same with DMH. They mark it as confidential, and they say we have 27 units. That just means 27 beds, and that's something that I wanted to look at. And I know that you had previously in the past, I think you might have said it, even in your a previous community development with another city, you said, I asked, and they like slapped me and said, that's confidential, you can't have it. It's not HIPAA, it's not any person's names being exchanged, it is just a residence, and they do fight that. So if they're not gonna provide it to us, because they're not, I mean, they ignore FOIA requests and public records requests for that information by just saying it's confidential. I think we can find this out ourselves, because when we went on that tour, and it only makes sense, when we went on that tour of the firehouses, they've got maps up, because they need to know what houses to go to, if they're recovery homes, if they're Department of Mental Health homes. They need to know how many people are in that house in order to save them and make sure that they get them out safely in case of an emergency or fire. So that we have that information. And we can get it through our public I probably have it too, but I know the fire department does. So I I would suggest, and I'll probably make a motion later this evening, is that we ask the fire department to provide us the addresses and the number of beds. Because again, they know, because they provide safety for all our residents, and they know how many beds, housing, how many number of people in those units. And all I want to do is match it to these numbers that they have. Because if we're potentially going to lose 250 units within the next several months because those comprehensive permits didn't break ground, I want to make sure that all the beds are being counted. I just want to make sure that the state has our accurate numbers, that we've given them our accurate numbers. Because again, we give them to the state. They don't tell us. A lot of people think the state tells us what our numbers are. They don't. All they do is record what we tell them. So that's what I think that we really need to focus on, is to match what numbers that they have with what we know accounts for affordable housing in the subsidized housing inventory process. So your thoughts on that? Am I accurate? And what are your thoughts on that, Kurt?
No, you're pretty accurate about that. I know whenever we get a project approved, we submit it to the state within a few days. And then they'll respond to us at some point. Sometimes it's quicker than other times that they respond. We never actually ask them to take anything off the list. We always put things on the list. They may come back to us and say, this project didn't count because they haven't done what they're supposed to do. And then we could ask them about that. So, and then there are a bunch of other little projects that we do because we have inclusionary zoning that we're always sending that in probably every month or two. We'll send it when projects get approved through our process. We'll send it on to the state for them to add on to the list. But everything else is pretty accurate.
And with the number of beds, you don't have any idea, like they just say it's confidential and these are the number of units. There's no way to cross-reference it to make sure that all of ours are being counted. And I know that this city embraces recovery and DMH housing throughout the city. So I would think that this number is a little low, and that's what I wanted to take a look at. So, and again, our fire department has it because they make sure everybody's safe. So I know that we know where these are and how many beds there are. So I'm hoping that we can just shake that out and make sure that the state has that number, that accurate number. And we can't do it if they're not going to share the information. So we might as well get the information ourselves. And we can easily. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Manning Martin. Any other councilors? Councilor Turco, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, you had mentioned at a previous community preservation meeting that you were looking into re-implementing the homeowner rehab program with some funding through the Affordable Housing Fund through community preservation. Are we still working on that? Are we looking at it? Because, I mean, as you can see from, there's quite a few that are coming off in the next year or two.
Yes, that's something that I intend to do and want to do. I haven't made the progress I need to bring it forward yet, but give me a little more time and I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. Councilor Rossignol, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Your Honor, the Mayor. So what is the process if a project does fall off? Does that mean the project is now null and void? Does that mean they have to go through the entire process again? How does that process go if they fall off of the...
Yeah, good question. So, yes, if it eventually comes off our list, and we don't notify the state, and I expect that we'll get some calls here or there about status of different projects and things like that, but that hasn't happened recently. But if it would come off after their allotted time, they would have to start the process all over again. Unless they petition before the expiration, then it could just be continued, or else they would have to, again, start it completely from the beginning.
So they can't turn around and sell it to a different developer when they're coming up to that deadline. They would have to, if the 3 years have passed, they would have to start the process all over right from ground zero.
I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Rosno. Councilor Gamache, please.
Yes, if I may. Have any of them taken out any types of building permits, that to your knowledge?
So
I thought the Farm Ave had pulled building permits.
I was trying to go through my head the different ones and getting a head nod from Kurt. Farm Ave did get their building permit. I don't know if the others have, though. I don't know if you were here, Councilor. There's a few that, are in play, and I think you know all these
Yeah.
anyway, but King Street, Endicott Street, the Mills 58, Farm Ave, Oak Street, and Newberry Street. But I don't believe beyond Farm Ave that others have
The
gotten.
reason why I ask is I think that when you pull a building permit, you have 2 years to start, or that permit becomes null and void. And I think they pulled it in January of '22. I'm just, for some reason, I know it was after I got into, took my seat, and I think it was January of '22, I'm not sure, but that would be a 2-year window that they have to do something with the property on a building permit, because then I believe it becomes null and void. So I think that is the only one that pulled a permit. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gamache. Councilor O'Neill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And through you, I'd like to ask the mayor just to clarify, in terms of there was a comment and I guess a question and answer regarding that if the applicants of say a 40B do not build, they could may have to resubmit if it expires, but then also they could request an extension. The extension, would that go to the local ZBA or the Mass Housing Authority? Who's the granting authority for the extension? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Neill.
We all think ZBA.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Neill. Any other questions? There being none, I want to thank the mayor and Mr. Bellavance and Stacy for being here and answering our questions, giving us an update. And we'll be talking about it more in the future, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions, any other things by the committee? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Test 1 2 1 2.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Municipal Safety Committee. Joining myself as chair are Councilors Gamache, Councilor Gould, Councilor O'Neill, and Councilor Rossignol, and we also have a full complement of the council joining us this evening. We have one matter on the agenda this evening. We had received a petition from Mount Vernon residents regarding street speeding and other issues. And if there are no objections from sitting members of municipal safety, I'd like to defer to the ward councilor as she referred this matter to committee. Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we received this in our packet a few weeks ago. This is, I think we've all heard these concerns throughout the city, but if you're not familiar with Mount Vernon Street, it's a hill that goes down. It's a one-way street. It's a large connector between Salem and Peabody, the downtown, the Stop and Shop. And we recently paved Mount Vernon Street, probably in the last 5 years. And that has just kind of exacerbated the issue of the speeding on the street. I've heard from many of the residents on the street about the issue, their concerns. So I think, they took initiative and sent this into us so it could get before us. I know that Mr. Silva, I believe, is here. If you'd like to, if it's okay with the chair, to invite the residents to speak about the issues happening on their street.
Sure, and we also have Captain Richards with us this evening to address their concerns as well. So, Mr. Silva, would you like to come up and state your name, address, and tell us what your concerns are? Thank you.
Again, good evening. My name is George Silva. I live on 18 Mount Vernon Street. I've been living there for 50-something years, and we have a little problem with traffic. They drive down the street like over 50 miles an hour. So we got to do something, put bumps, road bumps, or something, because it's ridiculous. So I hope the city will do something about it.
Thank you very much for joining us and bringing this issue up before us. Are there any other residents that want to speak to this subject?
What's that?
I was asking if there are any other residents that would like to speak.
Yeah, I have my neighbor.
If any other residents would like to
speak, yeah,
that would be
the one
fine.
asked me to do the petition because his dog got hit, and I guess whoever hit it reported to the police, saying had hit a dog on the street. Could be a dog, could be a human being, a kid. We don't know. It's just too much since they built Stop and Shop. I know it's a short way from Salem to Peabody to Northern Street, but it's just crazy. We have to do something about it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you
Silva.
very much.
You're welcome. Are there any other residents? If not, there are. Okay, please, sure, come on up and state your name and address into the record and tell us what your concerns are.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sylvia Acevedo. I live in 14 Mount Vernon Street. And recently, can't remember the exact date, but I was taking the trash out, and my dog followed me. He crossed the street. And when I called him on the way back, of course, cars are always speeding. He got hit. The car even didn't stop or anything. He just moved on, didn't even worry that was a kid or not. I have 3 kids under 15. The youngest one is 7. And it doesn't matter the time of the day. Cars are always over speeding. I can come from work. Sometimes I get out of work late, and it could be 9 or 10 o'clock. I have to, sometimes I park across the street from my house, and I have to stop because they don't even dare even slow down, or they can see me with a flashlight or anything. And I feel like this issue should be addressed somehow, especially kids, summer, or even, doesn't matter, the time of the year.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Captain Richards, would you like to come up and speak to these safety concerns on Mount Vernon, please? And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Cap Richards, Peabody Police. These complaints are not unique to just about every street in the city of Peabody. I take the complaints very serious. I do want to note that before we take action, we try to analyze data and whatnot to see if the problem is as drastic as it's painted out to be. We have traffic counters that we put up. I think some of the councilors have had these put in their wards in the past that gives us data on speeding cars, the times of the day, and everything else on what's going on. We actually deployed those when we first got them on Mount Vernon Street. That was one of the first streets that we put them on. Granted, it was probably pre-paving when they paved the road, but at that time when they did the data collection, it did show that there were some outliers and speeders on the street. The vast majority of the cars were going a very reasonable speed on the street, but there were outliers, and some were going as fast as 50 or 60 miles an hour down that street. Most of those vehicles, it was either late at night or very early in the morning, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So certainly there's an issue there that we want to address. I did an accident risk distribution study on the street, which is another thing that we do, to see if there's actually crash problems related to speeding and traffic on the street. And believe it or not, over the last 5 years, the only records that I found of crashes on Mount Vernon Street, there were 4. There was one that was an OUI drugs case that was arrested for driving under the influence of drugs. Another one, a gentleman pulled over to the side of the road, maybe to take a nap, and he forgot to put the car in park, and the car rolled and banged into another car. And then there were 2 other crashes that we found with the RMV database that we don't have in our system, which tells me that there were minor crashes that they sent reports right to the registry and didn't even report them to the Peabody Police. So based on that finding there doesn't seem to be a crash problem on Mount Vernon. Now that said, since the road has been paved, I'm sure that has exacerbated the problem a little bit. It always does. So from the police standpoint, what we would like to do is redeploy the traffic counters. And these aren't the signboards. These are actually counters that are kind of covert that collect data. We'd like to redeploy one of those out on the street for a period of time to collect data and see if this problem is as bad as it seems to be. And once we do that, we can then talk about either putting up a radar board and, of course, work some enforcement in there and do some citing and some tickets. Mount Vernon is a one-way street, and it is used as a cut-through coming from Oakland Street and the other side down to Howley Street and the Stop and Shop in Salem. So there is a lot of traffic that travels down that street. So we will address it from those different aspects, and hopefully we can come to a resolution and help mitigate the problem.
Thank you, Captain. Council Peach?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank Captain Richards for explaining the process, and I know we've gone through this on many other streets in Ward 3. Basically, every street next to Mount Vernon Street has the same complaints as well. Mount Vernon is a bit wider, and it's a very steep hill going down, so I know I catch myself, looking at the speed when I'm going down, and you can be going faster than you intend to, especially on that street. So I thank you. I think that's a great plan to just recollect the data now that the street's been paved, and then deploy the radar board to see maybe if that slows down those outliers. Thank you.
Councilor Gamache?
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Captain Richards, for attending. I have I don't know if it's possible. I traveled through Salem quite a bit, and on Margin Street in Salem, how they bumped out they made a bike lane. They've also made parking spaces on the side of the street. Mount Vernon's a fairly wide street. A lot of the residents do park across the street from their homes. I would ask Department of Public Services if there's a way that they could possibly paint some type of delineation line so that they know where the parking would be on the left-hand side of the street as you head to Stop and Shop. And that would bump the traffic. It would slow the traffic, definitely, because now you've got a narrower lane and they're not all over the place. But it seems to have worked on Margin Street in Salem, and I think that this may be a decent example that we can use. The street's wide enough, it's a one-way, you don't have to worry about traffic coming up the opposite way. And they park there anyways, and make it a little safer for them to park. To me, that would be the way we should go.
So my thought, if I may, striping always works, and we have to go through GPS and find out what the regulations are with where the stripes go and how many feet of shoulder on the road and all that. But striping certainly does aid in delineating the lane and letting people know where they're supposed to go and how they're supposed to go. So that's certainly something we can explore with the DPS and get on there and take a look with them and see if we can come up with some recommendations for some striping.
Any other councilors? Being none, I want to thank you, Captain Richards. I want to thank the residents as well for bringing this to our attention. And I'm very pleased, and I'm sure that the residents are too, Captain Richards, that they submitted this issue via petition only a few weeks ago, and you've jumped on it, and you've done a lot of work. You're collecting data, you're readdressing issues. And that's phenomenal work, and I thank you for being so proactive on this matter, and we look forward to you reporting back to us what solutions you come up with when you recollect the data. So thank you very much, Captain.
I appreciate that. We take all these complaints very serious, and of course we get them from all over the city, so we're doing the best we can.
And you're doing fine work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Gamache.
Yes, could I make that in the form of a motion that we send a communication to the Department of Public Services to look at the ordinances concerning delineating Mount Vernon Street, i.e. parking spaces or striped lines to narrow the street on the cemetery side as you're heading towards Stop and Shop?
Sure, help me out. An ordinance delineating.
Check the ordinances as to whether or not we are capable of putting out either parking spots or lines, hash marks to shorten the distance from each side of the street. Yes, on the cemetery side. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councillor Gamache. Any comments on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Thank you very much. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.